campground was supposed to be empty. That was the whole point. I'd spent weeks looking for somewhere far enough from the city to clear my head. No neighbors. No traffic noise. No cell service. Just trees, cold air, and silence. The ranger station website showed the place as seasonally closed, but primitive camping was still allowed if you signed the waiver online. I printed the permit and left it on my dashboard like the instructions said. It was late October when I arrived. Too cold for families. Too early for snow. The kind of in-between season where nothing feels settled. The gravel road leading in was narrow and rutted, lined with trees so tall they blocked out most of the sky. I didn't pass another car the entire drive. No headlights. No taillights. No signs of life. When I reached the campground loop, I slowed down instinctively. Every campsite was empty. Fire rings cold. Picnic tables damp with leaves. No tents. No vehicles. No trash. It looked abandoned in the cleanest way possible, like everyone had left it once and never come back. I parked at Site 12 because it was the farthest from the road, backed right up against a tree line that dropped into thick forest. I liked knowing no one could come up behind me without making noise. At least that's what I told myself. I set up camp quickly. Tent, sleeping pad, lantern. The temperature was already dropping and I didn't want to be fumbling around in the dark. By the time I finished, the sun was low, the light stretched thin and orange through the trees. The forest felt bigger once the day started fading, like the shadows were pushing inward. I checked my phone. No signal. I wasn't surprised. I cooked a simple meal over the stove and ate sitting on the picnic table, listening to the wind move through the trees. It wasn't scary yet. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you don't get at home. Around 7:30 p.m., it got cold enough that I zipped myself into a jacket and lit the lantern. That's when I noticed the sound. Footsteps. Not close. Somewhere deeper in the trees behind my campsite. At first, I assumed it was an animal. Deer maybe. But the rhythm was wrong. Too steady. Too deliberate. Crunch, pause, crunch. I stood still and listened. The sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. The forest went back to normal. Wind, branches, distant creaks. I told myself I was jumpy. That's what happens when you're alone somewhere unfamiliar. By 9 p.m. I crawled into my tent. I didn't bother starting a fire. The cold felt manageable and I didn't want the light drawing attention, even though I couldn't have explained what attention I was worried about. I turned off the lantern and lay there in the dark, listening. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps. Closer this time. They didn't approach directly. They moved parallel to my campsite, staying just beyond the edge of the light I'd left earlier. Whoever it was wasn't crashing through brush. They knew where they were stepping. I held my breath. The steps stopped. I waited for a cough. A voice. Anything that would explain it. Instead, I heard something softer. A slow exhale. Not close enough to be inside the campsite. Close enough that I could tell it wasn't an animal. I stayed completely still. After a long moment, the sound faded. Footsteps moving away. Deeper into the forest. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time the wind shifted or a branch snapped, my body jerked awake. Around 3 a.m., I heard movement again. Lighter this time, circling farther out, like whoever it was had widened their path. When morning came, I felt exhausted but relieved. Daylight changes everything. I stepped out of the tent and immediately noticed something wrong. The picnic table bench had been moved. Just slightly. It was no longer tucked neatly under the table like I'd left it. It had been pulled out a few inches, angled toward the fire ring. I stared at it longer than I should have. Wind didn't do that. I checked the ground around the campsite. The dirt was packed and leaf-covered, but near the bench I could see scuff marks. Not footprints exactly. Just disturbed leaves like someone had stood there for a while. Facing my tent. I packed up some gear and told myself I'd move campsites later that day. Closer to the entrance. Somewhere I'd feel less boxed in. I made coffee and tried to relax. Around 10 a.m. I heard a vehicle. An engine, distant but unmistakable. I stood up quickly and scanned the road. Nothing. The sound came again. Faint. Like a truck idling far away then cutting off. No one drove past. I didn't see anyone all day. No hikers. No rangers. No other campers. But around mid-afternoon I found something that made my stomach drop. Near the tree line behind my tent, half hidden under leaves, was a crushed aluminum can. It wasn't mine. I hadn't brought canned drinks. It was old, faded, dented in a way that suggested it had been stepped on recently. No rust. No dirt packed into it. Someone else had been there. Recently. I debated leaving. I really did. But something stubborn in me didn't want to be scared off by nothing concrete. No direct threat. No proof of danger. I told myself I'd stay one more night. I regret that decision more than anything else I've ever made. That evening, as darkness fell, the campground felt different. Heavier. The wind died down completely, leaving the forest unnaturally still. No insects. No birds settling in. Just silence. I ate quickly and zipped myself into the tent before full dark. At 8:47 p.m. I heard footsteps on gravel. This time there was no mistaking it. Someone was walking through the campground loop. I could hear each step clearly, the crunch of stones under boots. They passed site 11. Then stopped. I watched through the thin fabric of the tent as a shadow crossed the ground near my entrance. Someone was standing between my tent and the road. Not moving. I couldn't see their feet clearly, just the dark shape blocking out faint starlight. I didn't make a sound. After a while, long enough that my muscles started to ache, the shadow shifted. I heard the unmistakable sound of a zipper. Not my tent. Another one. Somewhere nearby. At 9:12 p.m., a flashlight beam swept across the trees. It avoided my tent deliberately. The light moved low, controlled, scanning the forest edge instead of the campsites. Whoever it was knew how to use it without drawing attention. I reached for my phone out of habit. No signal. The flashlight shut off. Footsteps moved closer. Then stopped. Right outside my tent. I could hear breathing again. Slow. Calm. Too calm. I don't know how long we stayed like that, me frozen inside, them standing just outside. Time stretched in a way that made it impossible to track. Eventually the footsteps retreated. I didn't sleep at all after that. At first light, I packed up everything in record time. Tent shoved into its bag, gear thrown into the car without care. As I drove out, I passed site 14. There was a tent there. A dark one, low to the ground, partially concealed by trees. No car. No fire pit use. No movement. I drove straight to the ranger station. It was closed. Boarded up for the season. Weeks later, I checked local reports out of curiosity. No missing campers. No incidents. No records of anyone else being registered at that campground that week. But the permit confirmation email I received, the one that proved I was allowed to be there, was gone. Not deleted. Just gone. And sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I think about that shadow outside my tent. How patient it was. How careful. Like it had done that before. I didn't plan to camp alone. That's the part people always assume is the mistake. Like solitude itself is reckless. But I wasn't supposed to be by myself. The trip had been planned for months. 3 of us, all in our early 30s, all burned out, all convinced that a long weekend in the woods would reset something that felt permanently off. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, one friend backed out. Work emergency. The other called the night before, voice tight, apologetic, said his kid was sick. I told him it was fine. I meant it. By the time I finished packing my truck, I'd already decided I was still going. The campsite was part of a national forest in the northwest. Not a popular one. No RV hookups, no reservations, just a long dirt road and a cluster of primitive sites near a river. I'd been there once before years ago with a larger group. It had felt remote but manageable. This time, it felt different the moment I turned off the highway. The road narrowed quickly, trees pressing in close enough that branches brushed the sides of the truck. There were no signs after the first mile marker. No mile numbers. No maps. Just the road and the forest swallowing it. I lost cell service within minutes. By the time I reached the campsite, it was late afternoon. The sky was overcast, low and heavy, the kind of gray that makes everything feel flatter and quieter than it should. There were 6 campsites. Only one was occupied. A single tent at Site 3. Dark green. Low profile. No vehicle parked nearby. I slowed down, scanning for movement. Nothing. No smoke from a fire. No gear laid out. No sound. I told myself the camper was probably out hiking. Or fishing by the river. Still, something about the empty parking spot bothered me. I chose Site 6, the farthest one. It backed up against dense trees and faced the river. I liked having water noise. It made the quiet feel less absolute. I set up quickly, aware of how alone I felt now that I was actually there. The forest seemed to absorb sound instead of reflecting it. Even my footsteps felt muted. Around 6:30 p.m., I walked down to the river with a flashlight and my phone, hoping to catch enough signal to text someone. No luck. When I came back, the light was already fading. That's when I noticed something new. Footprints. Fresh ones. They crossed the dirt road between Site 3 and Site 5, angled toward the tree line behind my campsite. Not boot prints, lighter tread like trail runners. Dull-sized. They weren't there earlier. I was sure of it. I followed them with my eyes until they disappeared into the leaves. I didn't follow. I cooked dinner and ate fast, standing instead of sitting, eyes drifting toward the trees every few seconds. I kept telling myself it was normal. Other campers. Hikers cutting through. But as the sky darkened, I realized something else. I hadn't heard a single human sound since I arrived. No talking. No laughter. No music. No doors closing. No engines. Just wind and water. At 9 p.m. I zipped myself into the tent. The river was louder at night. Constant. Almost comforting. It gave me something steady to focus on. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to silence. Not quiet. Silence. The river sound was gone. I lay there, eyes open, heart slowly accelerating as my brain caught up with what my body already knew something was wrong. Then I heard it. A cough. Close. Not in my campsite. Somewhere between sites 4 and 5. Human. Controlled. Like someone trying not to draw attention. I didn't move. A minute passed. Then footsteps. Slow. Careful. Deliberate. They moved across dirt, then gravel, then stopped. I realized they were standing on the road. Listening. I held my breath. The footsteps resumed, heading towards Site 3. I heard fabric shift. A zipper. Metal lightly clinking. Then a voice. Oh, come. Hello. It wasn't loud. It wasn't panicked. It sounded like someone checking if another camper was awake. No one answered. After a moment, the voice spoke again. You can come out. It's fine. I stayed frozen. Eventually, the voice stopped. The footsteps moved away. I didn't sleep again until morning. When daylight came, I checked Site 3. The tent was still there. Untouched. No footprints around it. No signs of anyone having entered or exited. The zipper was closed. I walked the perimeter of the campsite and found something else instead. Near the fire ring at Site 3, pressed into the dirt, was a shallow indentation. Oval-shaped. Too smooth to be a footprint. Like someone had been kneeling there for a long time. Facing the tent. I packed up half my gear that morning with the intention of leaving early. Then I heard a splash. Down by the river. I froze listening. Another splash. Heavy. Like someone stepping into shallow water. I moved closer, careful to stay quiet, peering through the trees. I saw a man standing knee-deep in the river, facing downstream. He was wearing dark clothes and a backpack. No fishing rod. No gear. Just standing there, completely still. I cleared my throat without thinking. He didn't turn around. After a few seconds, he stepped out of the water and walked into the trees on the opposite bank. No acknowledgement. No reaction. I left within the hour. As I drove out, I passed a trailhead sign I hadn't noticed on the way in. A piece of paper was taped to it, edges curled from moisture. Campsite temporarily closed. Use at your own risk. No date. No explanation. Weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched local news. Park reports. Forums. I found one post buried deep in a hiking subreddit. A single paragraph. Someone asking if anyone else had camped near that river and heard voices at night. Saying their friend's tent had been found empty in the morning, gear still inside. No replies. The account was deleted. I don't camp alone anymore. Not because of fear. Because of how patient whoever that was seemed to be. Like they weren't in a hurry. I've always been the planner in my friend group. If there's a trip, I'm the one who checks the weather, downloads offline maps, double-checks routes, prints permits, and packs extra batteries just in case. I don't like surprises, and I definitely don't like being unprepared in places where help is far away. That's probably why this still bothers me so much. Because nothing about this trip should have gone wrong. It was supposed to be a simple overnight camping trip in late fall. Shoulder season. Cold at night, crisp during the day. No bugs. No crowds. Just one night to reset before the workweek swallowed us again. There were 3 of us. Me, my cousin Aaron, and his co-worker Mike. I knew Aaron well. Grew up together. He was cautious, level-headed. Mike was newer to the mix. Quiet, polite, the kind of guy who listened more than he talked. He'd camped plenty according to Aaron, but he didn't oversell it. The campsite was about 2 hours from the city, tucked into a state forest with a long access road and no cell service past a certain point. Primitive sites only. First come, first served. When we arrived, there were already a few vehicles parked near the entrance. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made me uneasy. Not because of the cars themselves, but because of how they were parked. Not neatly. Not spaced out. They were clustered together near the tree line, as if people had pulled in quickly and left without thinking about alignment. No one was around. We drove deeper in and claimed a site near the end of the loop. It was secluded but not completely boxed in. Trees on 3 sides open toward a clearing. We set up camp just before sunset. The temperature dropped fast. By the time we had a fire going, our breath was already visible. The forest smelled damp and metallic like wet leaves and cold soil. Everything felt normal. Too normal. After dinner, we sat around the fire, drinking cheap whiskey and talking about nothing important. Or old stories. The usual stuff. The fire popped and hissed, throwing shadows across the trees. That's when Mike asked a strange question. Did either of you hear something earlier? Aaron and I looked at him. Hear what? I asked. I don't know, he said. Sounded like someone walking around outside the clearing. But when I looked, there was no one there. I shrugged it off. Probably someone at another site. Mike nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Around 11 p.m., we put the fire out and went to our tents. Aaron and Mike shared one. I had my own. The forest at night felt thicker. Heavier. Like the darkness had weight to it. I zipped my tent shut and lay there listening to the wind in the trees. At some point I woke up. No dream. No obvious noise. Just that sudden, instinctive alertness. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Smoke. Not campfire smoke. Something sharper. Like burning plastic or fabric. I sat up and listened. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow. Careful. Circling. Not crunching loudly through leaves. Whoever it was knew where to step. I whispered Aaron's name. No response. I reached for my headlamp but didn't turn it on. Then a voice spoke. Right outside the clearing. Soft. Come. Hey, you guys awake? It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't rushed. It sounded practiced. Aaron answered before I could stop him. Yeah. My stomach dropped. The voice replied. Sorry to bother you. My truck won't start. Any chance you've got jumper cables? Silence. Aaron hesitated. I could hear it in his breathing. We don't, he said finally. There was a pause. Longer this time. Then the voice said, That's okay. Mind if I wait by your fire for a bit? It's cold out here. Aaron looked toward my tent. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. Sorry, Aaron said. We're turning in. Another pause. Then footsteps moved closer. I heard the unmistakable sound of someone stepping into the clearing. That's when I turned my headlamp on. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on no one. The clearing was empty. The footsteps stopped. The voice spoke again, closer now. From behind my tent. You don't need the light. My heart slammed so hard it physically hurt. I didn't answer. Neither did Aaron. The footsteps moved away slowly, deliberately, toward the tree line. We didn't sleep after that. At first light, we packed up in silence. As we were loading the car, Mike froze. Do you see that? He asked. Near the edge of the clearing, pressed deep into the damp soil, were footprints. Barefoot. Leading in a slow circle around our tents. Not running. Not stumbling. Just walking. We drove straight out without stopping. At the entrance, the clustered cars were still there. But one was different. The driver's door was open. The interior light was on. The battery was dead. No one was around. Weeks later, Aaron called me after midnight. He sounded shaken. He told me Mike had quit his job. Moved out of state. No warning. Before he left, he sent Aaron a message. Just one line. That voice wasn't asking for help. I still think about how calm it sounded. like it knew exactly what to say.